Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the public meeting of the Board of Police Commissioners for Thursday, July 30th. If I could have a motion to approve the public agenda, please. Okay. All those in favor? Opposed, carried. And the minutes from the June 25th meeting of the Commission. Councilor Murray. Any discussion on the minutes? All those in favor? Opposed, carried. We have two items on the agenda for today. The first one is the mid-year crime stats, 2011 to 2020. Chief, you want to start us on this, please?
Sure, I will. Thank you very much, and good afternoon, Your Worship, members of our board, and anyone who's watching in. Every year we give you a mid-year snapshot of where we're at in terms of our crime stats. Our strategic services area of our police services put this together, and I know Ms. Karen Williams was involved in putting this together, although she's not here to present today. I think we have Ankil Patel on the phone, so if we do, I'd like to turn it over to him, and he can walk us through this report.
Ankil, if you could start, please, I appreciate it.
Thank you, Chief. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ankil Patel, and I'm going to provide...
I think we're having trouble hearing you, so if you can turn maybe the microphone up on your end, might be helpful on your computer, or if you're on a handheld.
Is it better now?
Yes, it is. A bit better.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ankil Patel, and I'm going to provide a summary of mid-year crime statistics report. Twice each year, once at mid-year and once at year-end, the Regina Police Service provides an analysis of police-reported crime in Regina over a 10-year period. This report compares most serious violation data compiled from January 1st to June 30th.
Still having a hard time hearing you.
Is it better now, or?
Marginally better. Maybe just really talk louder.
Sure. This report compares most serious violation data compiled from January 1st to June 30th for the period of 2011 through 2020. I would like to start with the crimes against person. There were 6.1% fewer reported crimes against person at mid-year 2020 than at mid-year 2019, and 7.8% fewer than at mid-year 2011. Then there were 8 homicides and 11 attempted murders reported at mid-year 2020. Total homicides at mid-year have increased over the last 4 years. However, the number of attempted murders has decreased compared to 2019. Next one is assault. There was a 3.8% decline in total assaults reported at mid-year 2020 than at mid-year 2019, and 11.3% fewer when compared to 2011. The 73 sexual assaults reported at mid-year 2020 were lower than at 10-year average, while the 44 reported other sex crimes were higher than the 10-year average. There was a 24.3% decrease in robberies reported at mid-year 2020 compared to 2019, and 21% compared to 2011. The 9 reported occurrences of kidnapping and forcible confinement at mid-year 2020 is higher than the 10-year average. The 12 reported criminal harassment occurrences at mid-year 2020 was slightly lower than the 10-year average. When we look at the crimes against property, there were 30.4% fewer reported crimes against property at mid-year 2020 compared to 2019, and 1.29% fewer compared to 2011. There were 48.4% fewer theft of motor vehicles at mid-year 2020 than at mid-year 2019, and 5.8% compared to 2011. There were 36.4% fewer occurrences of theft at mid-year 2020 than at mid-year 2019, and 9.4% fewer compared to 2011. Of those theft offenses in 2020, approximately 33% were theft from auto. The 106 identity thefts and frauds reported at mid-year 2020 were higher than the 10-year average. And from mid-year 2019 to 2020, identity thefts and frauds have increased by 9.2%. There were 15.9% less break-in enters at Media 2020 than at Media 2019 and 19.8% more compared to Media 2011. There were 19.6% fewer reported mischief and willful damage occurrences at Media 2020 compared to 2019.
Thank you. Could you raise your voice a bit more, please? Would you mind? You're just sort of fading a bit.
Sure. There were 19.6% fewer reported mischief and willful damage occurrences at Media 2020 than at Media 2019, and 12.1% fewer than at Media 2011. The 106 reported arson incidents at Media 2020 were higher than the 10-year mean average. Other criminal code occurrences have decreased at 17.9% at Media 2020 compared to 2019, and 27% compared to 2011. Approximately 83% of the criminal code violations were procedural offenses. There were 9% fewer procedural offenses at Media 2020 than at Media 2019, and 32% fewer than at Media 2011. CDSA occurrences increased by 46.4% at Media 2020 compared to 2019, and 8.2% compared to 2011. There were 7.4% fewer criminal code traffic violations at Media 2020 than at Media 2019, and 17.5% fewer than at Media 2011. There were 34.7% less traffic tickets issued at Media 2020 than at Media 2019, and 57.6% fewer than at Media 2011. There were around 1.1% more calls for service at Media 2020 compared to 2019, and 4% more compared to 2011. There were 21.2% fewer alarm calls at Media 2020 than at Media 2019, and 72.7% fewer than at Media 2011. Overall, Regina experienced 19.6% decrease in total crime in the first half of 2020 compared to the 11.6% increase seen in 2019. Crimes against person decreased 6.1%, crimes against property decreased 30.4%, and other criminal code offenses decreased 17.6% when compared to previous year. With considerable decreases in some crime categories, it is likely that COVID-19 pandemic has had an effect on some crime trends in Regina. So that was an overall overview of this Media Crime Statistics report. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation. Chief, do you have anything you want to add to this before we open it up?
Yeah, I don't think so. We're going to, after this report, we'll go into our current monthly crime stats, and the conversation will be very similar. We are seeing some fluctuations, increases in some and decreases in other, and I can speak to those trends if you want after that report.
Good, thank you for that. Okay, any comments or questions? Okay, if not, I'll ask for a motion to receive and file this report. Councillor Young, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. So we'll move on to the monthly crime stats for June. Chief.
Okay, thank you very much, Your Worship. So, yeah, these are the crime stats taking us to the end of June of 2020, so essentially for the first half of the year. We are still trending downwards, which is positive in terms of the crime stats. Our crimes against property so far reflect the decrease in this year over 2019 of 30.4%. So thefts, mischiefs, and I think one of the big ones we're seeing is theft of auto rates have all decreased. There's probably a lot of factors for that. COVID being certainly one that we can't ignore has greatly impacted some crime trends in a few areas. Some of the crime trends that we're seeing in the analysis that we see, especially if we're looking at increases, it has a lot to do with enforcement activity. So, for example, if we look at our drug stats, our CDSA charges are up 46.4%. that really is just indicative of some fairly aggressive work that our investigators have been doing in digging into trafficking and drug challenges in our community pertaining to the selling of drugs. If we go over to crimes against person, year-to-date decrease of 6.1%. And again, we're seeing a few areas where notable decreases are happening. Robberies is a big one. We're down 24.4% there. So if you look at both categories, it actually works out to almost 2,400 less reported incidents in the two categories, crimes against person, crimes against property, and it's a 26.3% decrease over where we were last year at this time. I will note just quickly, I mentioned the drug enforcement number. Another one that we're challenged with in the city right now has been arson. Arson has been something that we've seen a fairly significant increase in. That is everything from garbage bin fires to vacant structures. And so there has been some work done, and in a couple of cases, successful charges laid against individuals who were responsible for a large number. Arsons, not always, but often trend like graffiti, where you have one or two people responsible for a large number of them. And so there's been some really good work done by our arson investigators, investigative services division, to hold those people accountable. But we do see a bit of a spike in that number as well.
It's good. Questions or comments on the report? Councillor Young.
Just a question, Chief. You said that the arsons mostly are happening in vacant structures, and are those structures boarded as they're supposed to be? Is the arson from the outside, or are people in structures that haven't been boarded up according to the bylaw?
Sure, I'm going to turn over to Deputy Chief Dean Ray to answer that question.
I can't answer on all of them, but I know we just had one this week where they actually pulled the boards off and went into the structure, and then there was the fire that happened as a result of that. So I think it's like the combination of both, but most of the time they are boarded up from the information that we have, and individuals are breaking into those structures and then looking for shelter and starting a fire.
Okay, and I think that there's a limit on the amount of time they can be boarded up before something is done. So that's something we can take a look at too.
We do have an active housing standards team that we work with the fire and the city on, so there is a lot of work that gets done on that from our end as well.
Okay.
So we're working closely with fire on these arsons and housing standards. So they're very much aware of what's going on out there, and that's part of that partnership and community work that's being done.
So if there was a need for more bylaw enforcement in an area, we would know about it.
Yeah, well, I'm assuming it would all come through housing standards.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Councillor Murray.
A question I have it's outside of it's never listed here, and it's around cyber crimes. If it is listed in there, that'd be great to know what those fall under. Obviously, the type of crime, it would depend. But I'm wondering, have we seen an increase in the last, we've seen this 4 months now of trends that have changed due to COVID. Are we seeing a significant increase in online crimes and cyber crimes?
Yeah, so if you noticed on the mid-year report there that Ankil Patel walked us through, there was a report in there on identity theft and fraud. And so I know that's not necessarily the broad topic of cybercrime, but I think we have seen some increases with regard to frauds, identity thefts, those types of things. Oftentimes, cybercrimes end up reported as thefts or frauds because that's really what the crime is. It might have happened on the internet, or it might have had another mechanism that had transpired in our community, but often what the offense is something that translates on this page. Even other sexual offenses, for example, are things like exploitation and those types of things. So cybercrimes they're a very real challenge for us, obviously, and we're continuing to be vigilant on that. people being at home, people spending more times on computers, less time to be in workplaces and schools where they're educated on the dangers of that kind of thing, can be very challenging. And so I know I have had a couple of conversations with people that work in those areas trying to find ways to do outreach. In fact, just this past week, we had one of our sergeants who works in commercial crime wanting to get the approval of some work that they're going to do to prevent Bitcoin fraud, which is becoming a big challenge. People making phone calls saying that they owe amounts of money to the federal government, to Canada Revenue Agency, and that it can be done by going to a Bitcoin machine and putting that money in, which is very, very tough to trace once that transaction happens. So we're trying to proactively prevent those types of things. So it definitely is a challenge, and I think really why you don't see e-crimes on this stat sheet is we focus more on the theft that occurs as a result of them, luring someone through the internet or those types of things.
Perfect. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. You wouldn't be able to, it's just where it occurs, so that makes a lot of sense. Thank you for the clarity.
Thank you, Councilor Murray. Commissioner Yee?
Worship. Yeah, I have a question. Lately in the news, it's been a big news item is basically the discussion around victims coming forward with sexual allegations against sexual harassment, specifically in the workplace. I see here that sexual crimes is up 69%. What are your thoughts around that? Do you think it's because, we are encouraging now more victims to be less victimized and speaking up about this, or, and what's your plan around, this number?
Sure. So, yeah, I'll say a couple of things about that, Commissioner Yee. You're right. The conversation that happens not just in our community, but globally now around sexual assault, sexual violence, I think is at a point where people are feeling much more comfortable and in many cases empowered in a positive way to come forward with their allegation and trusting that it will be taken seriously. Police services, ours included, have taken a lot of steps to increase training, education, and even just the situation and manner in which we take those types of complaints. The partners that we work with, there's been a lot of work done to make sure that we build confidence in the public that if they come forward with that type of complaint or allegation, that there will be a good investigation that's done. So I do think that, given what has happened in the world in the last 3, 4, 5 years, there's been more focus on it, and that has made it possible for people to come forward who might not have come forward to report it before. We've got some close ties with agencies in our community like the Regina Sexual Assault Center, and building that kind of working relationship has been so instrumental for our police service. In fact, we had them come in and do training to every one of our frontline members within the last year and a half on the trauma that is felt by a survivor of sexual assault or sexual violence, and how police can make that interaction a more positive one and really not re-victimize a person who's going through something like that. So there's been a lot of work on that. I think recently what you're talking about in terms of people going to social media and reporting allegations, a lot of those right now are being reported anonymously. So it's people putting out an allegation, this is what happened to me, and they're telling their stories. We've been working with our media section, we've got Ms. Elizabeth Popowich here, to try and get the message out that we are more than happy to help people come in, talk to us about what their experience was, and then do a proper investigation. It's not possible for us to do that anonymously. So a lot of the stuff that's on social media right now is anonymous. Some people choose to keep it that way, and that's fine, that's their decision, but we are trying to take some steps to help people realize that coming forward with that information and having a proper investigation done with right supports in place to help them through this journey is an important part of healing, and it's one that our police service can play an important role in.
Any other questions? Commissioner Pankratz, go ahead.
Thank you. Chief, I'm looking at the stats regarding cell phone charges and warnings, and the dramatic decrease from last year of 80%. Is that a change in enforcement, or are people actually learning?
I'd like to say that it's the latter, but here's what I'll tell you. Two things. Number one, SGI has designated months where we do focused traffic enforcement. That's not to say that it can't happen in other months, but there is a month designated where they do heightened awareness, education, and enforcement on seatbelt enforcement, for example. Well, one of the months that was scheduled for cell phone enforcement was March. And so March of this year was not a year, or not a month where we did much enforcement, if any, because it was right in the heart of COVID breaking loose. And so our message to our staff was, you know, we need to maintain public safety, but we also need to make smart decisions and understand that this is a challenging time for people, and the people that have to use the roadways and are still having to go to work, let's just, you know, use some discretion. So we did see a fairly significant decrease in our tickets. The other important thing to note is Constable Mike Seal, who works for our police service, who worked in our traffic safety section for many years, wrote, I don't know, I want to say 1,400 distracted driving tickets last year alone by himself. He has transferred into patrol, so he no longer works in traffic safety. He's still writing the odd distracted driving ticket, but believe it or not, that had a significant impact also in other categories of enforcement. So it's got a lot to do with, you know, someone who has really got the appetite to focus on distracted driving. He did a lot of public education on it as well. So I would say it's a little bit of enforcement focus along with COVID that's caused that number to be decreased.
Thank you.
Any other questions? A motion to receive and file then? Commissioner Yee, all those in favor? Opposed, carried. And a motion to adjourn. Councilor Young, all those in favor? Opposed, carried. Thank you very much, everybody, and have a great afternoon.